For today's In Focus, we travel to northern Iraq and the ancient Assyrian city of Nimrud, strategically located around 10 kilometers north of the point where the river Tigris meets the Great Zab. This is around 30 kilometers southeast of the city of Mosul. The ancient city of Nimrud once covered an area of 360 hectares. That's around 890 acres, though the state and the extent of the city today are somewhat unknown. We'll return to this later. The name Nimrud was first written down in conjunction with the site by Karsden Niebuhr in 1760. This name, assigned by the Arabs, is believed to be a reference to the legendary biblical hunter Nimrod. In 1820, the British explorer Claudius James Rich said that locals generally believed this to have been Nimrod's own city, and one or two of the better informed with whom I have conversed at Mosul said it was Al-Arthur or Al-Ashur, from which the whole country was denominated. In 1850, Sir Henry Rawlinson identified the place as the biblical city of Calah, referred to alongside Nimrod in Genesis 10, and based possibly on an interpretation of the city's name in cuneiform, Levek. Over the past couple of hundred years, the name of this site and how it related to the Bible, if at all, has been hotly debated. But today the site is called Nimrud, and in 1845 archaeological excavations began. These investigations continued with intermittent breaks until 1879, and then were resumed in 1949. Excavations uncovered exquisite bas-relief, carved stone surfaces of incredible detail, artistry, extent, and scale. These were truly impressive, monumental pieces of art. From the monumental to the portable, ivories were recovered at Nimrud of such exquisite detail and artistry. Dating to between the 9th and 7th centuries BC, these incredible artifacts had been decorated with gold leaf and precious stones. They speak of the status of Nimrud and the city's connections to places such as Egypt. Exquisite statues were recovered, including a portrait of the ruler Ashurnasirpal II himself. Indeed, the sheer volume of inscriptions about this king make his reign one of the most well understood of all of the Assyrians. And of course, there were the iconic winged man-headed lions guarding the palace entrance. In all, more than 6 pairs of these guardians were recovered by archaeologist Sir Austin Henry Layard. They weighed between 10 and 30 tons and took up to 300 men to manoeuvre. In 1847, Layard brought 2 of these statues to the British Museum in London. Others were transported to Paris, Chicago, and New York, and some remained on site. The vast majority of statues, artwork, and inscriptions, for example, the portrait of Ashurnasirpal II, did end up in places like the British Museum. For example, the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, made of black limestone, stands 6.5 feet tall in the British Museum, and records on 24 carved panels the victories of the king, battles fought between 859 and 824 BC. Curiously, the so-called treasure of Nimrud, 613 pieces of gold, jewellery, and precious stones, remained in the country. They survived looting, theft, and were hidden away prior to the Gulf War in 1990 to be rediscovered in 2003 in a bank vault. Research and excavation over the years led to a good understanding of the site. It was the Assyrian king Shalmaneser I in the 13th century BC who built Nimrud during the Middle Assyrian Empire. But things really got going when King Ashurnasirpal II in the Neo-Assyrian Empire in the 9th century BC made Nimrud his capital. He commissioned a large palace and temples to rejuvenate the city. There's a carving that describes a grand opening ceremony with banquets and festivities in 879 BC. One carved inscription proudly stated a palace of cedar, cypress, juniper, boxwood, mulberry, pistachio wood, and tamarisk, for my royal dwelling and for my lordly pleasure for all time. I founded therein beasts of the mountains and of the seas, and of white limestone and alabaster. I fashioned them and set them upon its gates. The city was huge, with a population as large as possibly 100,000 people. It contained botanic gardens and even a zoo. The king's son, Shalmaneser III, continued his father's legacy. He spent 31 out of 35 years of his reign at war, and undeniably added to the grandeur of Nimrud. Shalmaneser built a palace twice the size of his father's. It covered an area of 5 hectares or 12 acres and had more than 200 rooms. Shalmaneser's son rebelled against him, and from there the history of Nimrud and its rulers is long and complex. The city and the palace were for the most part destroyed during the fall of the Assyrian Empire between 616 and 605 BC. As the millennia passed by, sands reclaimed Nimrud, leaving only mounds and ruins in the landscape. But this was not the end of Nimrud's story. Archaeologists investigated the site, and while it is undeniable that many treasures were indeed taken to museums around the world, the importance of Nimrud for world and biblical history was established, and there was still plenty to see on the walls of this once great city. Nimrud survived the 20th century and the Gulf War of the 1990s. 2003 once again saw conflict come to the region, but the UN, supported by the military, did what they could to preserve and protect the site. Nimrud was deemed worthy of such efforts because of its importance to the history of humanity. However, in recent years, a shadow has fallen over the people and the history of the region. Islamic State, a self-styled caliphate looking to spread its ideals across the region, have taken it upon themselves to attack the physical history of northern Iraq. They do this supposedly after the fashion of Muhammad the Prophet, who tore down idolatrous statues in Mecca in honor of the one God, Allah. Small artifacts are looted and sold to pay for ammunition. Large artifacts are destroyed publicly as they are deemed un-Islamic. These vandals seemingly ignore the simple truth that these statues were made in a time before Islam. They are not un-Islamic, they are simply ancient. This footage is from an attack on a museum in Mosul in February 2015. However, around the same time, claims were surfacing from Iraqi authorities that IS had also taken to attacking Nimrud. Earlier this month, in April 2015, IS released confirmation of this destruction. Men are shown gathered, destroying walls, statues, art, information, and other cultural artifacts on the site of Nimrud. The destruction is truly outrageous, very upsetting to anyone who loves history, and surely heartbreaking to those locals who took pride in their heritage. Earlier reports that the men had been using bulldozers to attack the city appear to have been confirmed. Heavy machinery is shown scooping up and tossing away bas-relief carvings like rubble on a building site. The footage is shocking and offensive, but it serves merely as a prelude to the full measure of destruction which will be wrought upon Nimrud. Next we see a line of barrels, placed carefully close to what remains of the ancient art. These are explosives. The final and most heinous act of desecration on this site is to blow it up. Cynically, IS even filmed the event from multiple camera angles. We've never seen anything quite like this. Nimrud was a centre of art, learning and civilization. It is truly ironic that its end should be so barbaric. In some ways it is good that over the years many artifacts have been saved in museums in different parts of the world, including in the Middle East. But these now merely hint at a place which is apparently gone for good. The act of destroying Nimrud and related artifacts is not only, ironically, an attempt to become iconic, but it is also an attempt to edit and erase a portion of human history. In making this video, I am doing my part to ensure that Nimrud and its place in the Assyrian pre-Islamic history of northern Iraq is not forgotten. Nimrud was a beautiful city, and it is not un-Islamic to be fascinated by and to study the past. It is my hope that one day the ignorance behind such destruction will fade away. But until then, all we can do is challenge wanton destruction and do our best to keep alive the remarkable beauty of our heritage.